Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verses 74 to 82. Al-Haqq is meant to prevail, and definition of a Muslim. We will go through a couple of slides on this aspect and see that if we can come up with some uniform definition. These are the references in relation to this presentation, and this is our contact in case there is any query or question. Recap verses 66 to 73. Whatever is in the universe and the earth belongs to Allah. Hence, we need to be absolutely clear never to associate any partners with Him. Association makes the formula null and void. And this is something which we have gone through a few times, that it is not that it affects Allah in any case, because the benefits which we wish to draw out of the Quran, those benefits become null and void. Because any association, if we have with Allah in the process of understanding the Quran, and that will make our efforts weaker, and we cannot follow the Quran the way Quran is asking us to follow its guidance. And our striving on His path must be in line with the guidance provided in the Quran. Mu'mineen remove every kind of zan in this regard and dedicate their efforts towards Deen. Zan means all those doubts, suspicions, conjectures, others arising in our heart which create weakness in our psyche. The Quran wants us to be focused completely on the guidance of the Quran. There is a sign in the creation of night and day, and our sleep at night is to provide us with peace and tranquility. Those who invent a false belief of saying that Allah has a son do so unjustly, because Allah cannot have son. At a self level, as we discussed in our presentation, that Allah cannot, any self cannot reproduce at the level of self. And if we hold those kind of beliefs, which are not factual, which are based on a lie, then our psyche is affected. They need to comprehend this reality that Allah is not biological, and at the self's level, procreation is not possible. Then also that Allah does not need the aid of anyone, and understanding the concept of Allah accurately from the Quran is part of the human self's development process and procedure. As human beings, we need to be accurate and precise in forming concepts, as this affects our self's development. Never to tell lies, as this affects the human self. Because sometimes one can say that what difference will it make? But it does make a difference over a long period of time, because any contamination which we are carrying along in our conscious or subconscious is affecting our psyche. No instructed his people to stay on the guidance of Allah in order to prosper. However, most of them rejected the message of Allah and ultimately were caught in a stormy flood which destroyed them and cut short their earthly life. The Mu'mineen with Nuh replaced them in the land. Defining a Muslim, proposed format of acceptance. I took this definition from one of the presentations by Allama Pervez in Urdu, where he proposed this definition. And I did not come across this definition subsequently, either in his writing or in his talks. Maybe someone else has. But I thought that it is worth going through just to look at it more closely. I acknowledge this fact that the Quran, which is coming preserved and protected from the time of its revelation among Muslims from the direction of Allah on His last Nabi, Muhammad, Rasulullah, as being final Wahi. Second part of the definition is it, that is the Quran, is for the whole of mankind until the last day, the only complete, immutable, untampered code of life, the criterion for haqq and batil, and is a decisive word and command in all matters of life. And it sets eternal limits for our individual and collective freedom and restrictions, and each and every word of it is based on truth. I accept it. Now, if we look at this definition, it is like an oath. So should we say that anyone who declares to be a Muslim should go through this oath? So these kind of issues are important to consider, because if, like in the case of Ahmadis, if people declare them as non-Muslims, then the question arises in our mind, who is a Muslim? And that was the background of giving this definition by Allama Pervez. In order to differentiate between a Muslim and a non-Muslim, there is a need to define a Muslim clearly in the light of the Quranic value system. Leaving things undefined leads to confusion and absence of clarity. Because if we look around and see that Islam is not even defined, if we ask two people, what is the definition of Islam, that will seldom be the same. The reason is because we haven't defined these precisely. We know that Islam of the Quran is different from the sectarian versions of Islam. Now, this is taken from a lecture in October 1974 by Allama Pervez. The lecture covered aspects of Ahmadiyya movement. This assumes that the individual has accepted Iman as defined in the Quran, but then these are just words which anyone can utter, and will this be accepted as his or her declaration of Iman? Should there be some further criterion to verify it, and who will have the authority to do so? And that is important as well. And here we can see that it is really a matter for the system of Deen to do it. The law of requital and understanding the law of respite are an essential part of understanding Deen as a system. Should this form part of this definition? Second point is the Quran has declared Iman and Amal Saleh as fundamental for becoming a mu'min and reaping the benefits of a better life when Deen is not yet established, and the whole Deen is based on this formula. Should this be included in this definition? For example, a statement like this, that I fully understand the importance of Iman and Amal Saleh in relation to Deen, and I fully commit to this as part of Jamaat Mu'mineen. Because once we have a definition, then that definition should encompass every aspect so that it is not left out to any doubt, any suspicion, any conjecture that one may come back and say that this and this is not included. And because people do make excuses to get out of their responsibility. Rejecting all systems of Taghut, which are man-devised systems, and only accepting Deen of Allah as a system, and then making a commitment to strive for it with other mu'mineen. Another point is, Allah has asked us to strive on His path as part of a Jamaat and to offer our possessions and life in this cause. Should this form part of this statement? So these are some of the points which I thought need consideration as well, and we can add some more too. These are some of the issues which we need to consider for inclusion. However, the bottom line is that ideally the whole of the Quran needs to be part of this definition. The individual who has decided to become a mu'min and a Muslim needs to understand the commitment he or she is making on this path with the complete agreement of heart and mind as noted in verse 2 to 56, and then to manifest this agreement through conduct in practical life. Now let us go to the first verse for our today's presentation, 1074, guidance provided to Mu'mineen regarding the human psyche. And I'll go through its meanings. Even after Nuh, we sent messengers to different nations in the same way. They came to them with clear laws and perspicuous reasonings. But their state was such that they used to reject their message even before comprehending it. And the matter which they rejected like this, they would then never accept it, no matter how many reasonings were presented before them. Those people who become transgressors of limits to such an extent in their arrogance and stubbornness, the ability to think and reflect no longer remains in them. The messengers were guided about the human psyche. Here, after mentioning Nuh, the Quran has pointed to this fact that the messengers were sent to various people on earth as part of Allah's Mashiach of providing guidance to mankind residing in different parts of the world. These messengers came with clear laws and perspicuous reasonings for these people. We need to assume here that most were from amongst them and that these people knew them well. Next, the Quran mentioned an important point related to the human psyche, and this is something which needs a very careful reflection. It is said that these people rejected the message even before hearing it and understanding its details. I put inverted commas on hearing because people do hear, but hear Hearing over here means that they should understand as well. There is a point of instruction here for us which we can compare to our own experience. Since these people did not feel any need for this message and never wished to give up the path of their forefathers, since the path of convenience is very hard to give up, since they were not willing to pay any attention to this message from Allah. Next is, now comes the crux of the matter which the Quran has stated in a few words, i.e., لِيُؤْمِنُوا بِمَا كَذَّبُوا بِهِ مِنْ قَبْلُ. They were not going to accept that message which they had denied earlier. Because human beings, once they reject a method and they think they don't need it, it becomes very hard for them to come back to it, because a sort of arrogance and stubbornness sets in. Further reflection. Here Allah has guided us to this important aspect of the human psyche, to not raise your expectations about those people to whom we have given the message and who have rejected it. Once the message is passed and they do not want it, then leave them alone and do not waste any more time in thinking about them or going after them. For example, we also experience that, for example, we have handed over the book to someone to read. And we might have a desire that I wish he comes back to discuss it. But if they don't come back, don't waste any more thought on that and move on. Because such thoughts slow us down. These cause some kind of a dissonance within our own head. We start worrying or thinking about things which are of no concern to us. Then Allah has pointed to the effect such an attitude has on the human psyche, i.e., the ability to think rationally and to reason becomes blocked in relation to the guidance of Wahi. Otherwise, they are such that they use all kinds of trickeries for their vested interests within the man-devised systems. So it is not that they don't understand. If we look at these people who reject Allah's message, they do it deliberately, because if we look at their life, otherwise they are very clever people. They will do all kinds of tricks in their life, material benefits of the world. In fact, deep down, their belief that life ends with death is what prevents their intellect from reflecting on the message of Allah. By summing up the verse with the term Al-Mu'tadeen, the Quran has stated that now there will be a distance between their hearts and minds and the guidance of Allah. And that's very interesting. This has consequences for their psyche, and inner conflicts will push them towards injustice and transgression in human affairs. If we remember, it is stated, for example, in 236, وَقُلْ نَهْبِتُوا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوًّا. This is in relation with Adam. Go down with enmity among you or with one another. The word used over here is aduwan, which means there will be a wedge between you. If you do not follow the guidance of Allah, then there will be conflicts and there will be chaos and you will be fighting with each other. Next verse is 1075. Recognizing criminality and its effects on human psyche need to be observed. Again, I'll go through the meanings. After these nations, we gave Musa and Haroon our laws and sent them to Pharaoh and his leaders. They also adopted transgression against these laws because they had become such a party whose conduct was to resort to injustice and tyranny towards the weak, and to rob them of the outcome of their hard work. How could they lend an ear to the matter of haqq and justice? Let us have some further reflections on this verse. Here the Quran has taken us to the story of Musa and Haroon, who were also messengers of Allah. They appeared at a time when Bani Israel had given up on the guidance of Allah and were trapped in the slavery of Pharaoh. This story is covered in various verses with different details for our guidance and instruction. And we will go through it as we go along other surahs. Here the Quran has stated that these two messengers were sent to Pharaoh and his leaders, i.e., all those people who held the reins of power and as a consequence established a system which was against the divine order. Over here we get a summary of what happened between Pharaoh and Hazrat Musa and his brother. But there are a lot more details which will be covered in other surahs. Musa and Haroon went to them with the signs of Allah, and after listening to these, they reacted with arrogance and pride and rejected it. So when Musa presented Allah's Wahi and guidance to Pharaoh and his people, they rejected it. Implicit here is the fact that they did not wish to change their line of thinking and their conduct. Obviously, what was presented to them was to do justice and eliminate imbalances in the society. If we link this behavior with what is stated in 1074, we can understand the psyche behind this kind of behavior. The verse concludes comprehensively when it states Kanu Kauman Mujrimeen, i.e., based on evidence, Pharaoh, his cohorts, and the people who obeyed them had become criminals. They did not wish to change their path of life, as this is what they wanted for themselves. The term mujrimeen means exploitation, living off the hard work of others and depriving them. It is used as opposite of muslimin. Next verse 1076, as Al-Haqq goes against human unbridled desires, hence people oppose it. Those not looking for guidance react with all kinds of labels. And this is quite common. We see it as well, that like through Islam presents the message of the pure Quran, and we are also labeled with different names and different titles. فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ عِنْدِنَا قَالُوا إِنَّ هَذَا لَسِحْرٌ مُبِينٌ. Hence, when that system of ours was presented before them, which was based on haqq and truth in totality, they refused it by stating that this is an open lie and batil. The word used over here is la sihrun mubin, that sihr is normally, sometimes it is translated as some kind of a magic, but it is really about batil and about lies. A mubin means there was no doubt in that. And these people opposed Al-Haqq because Al-Haqq was going against their desires. Further reflections. In this verse, the Quran takes a step further and states that Haqq was presented to them from the direction of Allah, not from the direction of Musa and Haroon. I put down this comment here because we should also keep it in mind that when we are passing on Allah's guidance to others and sharing its salient points with others, then it is from Allah we are sharing. This is not our message. They made it clear that it is from Allah, and since it is Haqq and they have batil, hence it has come here to replace batil. We should always avoid using anything like this, I believe, in my opinion. It is not my belief and my opinion. When we quote the Quran, we should have a verse over there and we should explain it and let the people make their own decision. An important point here for our guidance is that we need to present the message of the Quran from Allah and explain its basis by pointing out the imbalances which the system of batil creates among mankind. So when we pass on the message, we also draw people's attention to imbalances in the society, the conflicts, the chaos, so that there's a concrete example before them, and they should understand that what the Quran is presenting is a solution to these problems. Then the Quran states the reaction of these people in power, i.e., they say, Inna hadha la sihrun mubin. This value system will turn us away from the batil system we have, and we will lose all those benefits which are associated with the existing system. So that is the underlying opinion they are expressing, because they see it clearly that what is being told by the Quran is going to deprive them of all the wrong benefits they are getting from the wrong system. These people quickly gauged the potential of Al-Haqq and its ability to eliminate their exploitative system, and they reacted resolutely and called it as being clearly and obviously against their system. They declare it to be a lie, knowing it to be haqq. The message of Allah came as a shock to them, as it challenged the very foundation of their unjust system. In order to counter it, they had to use all kinds of trickeries and ploys. We can relate this to every kind of trick which people in power use to deceive and misguide the masses. The whole media is to draw attention from the facts. It is to misguide people so that people are turned into some kind of a cattle and sheep so that they can follow them blindly. As masses do not use their rational minds, they follow them blindly. Let us look at the next two verses, 1077, 78, same old ploy of the obedience of forefathers. We'll go through the meanings. Musa said to them that, do you call this haqq which is being presented before you like this as being a lie and batil? Remember, those people whose claims are lies and are based on batil never see the face of success, and you will witness how I will succeed in my mission. The law of Allah which Musa presented, those people could not refute it on the basis of knowledge and evidence. They could not refute it because he must have told them that, look, the injustices in your society and the poverty and deprivation in one part of the society is a clear evidence that your path is wrong. Therefore, they adopted that same technique which is being followed by those following Batil right from the beginning. They stated that, have you come to us for this so that you turn us away from this maslak which is being handed down to us continuously from our forefathers. Maslak means their way of life, their path. And in this way, by ending our power, take control of the state in your hands. We understand your tricks very well, hence we are not about to listen to any of your arguments and will not have iman. Deen of Allah is based on rational reasoning. Having listened to their response, Musa replied to them that this haqq which is presented before you cannot be lies and batil. It has come to replace your system of batil, which is producing criminal effects in your society, whereas this is here to produce constructive results. And this is what haqq means. Allah cannot allow this to continue for eternity. A stop has to be put to it, and then it has to be replaced. I added this sentence after carefully thinking through what is being said over here, and of course, under the overall context of the Quran, that it is not wise on our part to think that the wrong system will continue forever. It's not supposed to be eternal. If human beings stand up for the cause of Allah, then they will get help. He then elaborated this further by stating that success and prosperity can never emerge from a system of lies and deceits. Since they saw that the message of Allah was contrary to their established belief system, and they did not see anything wrong with this belief system being its beneficiaries. And that is the point, because they were the beneficiaries. So they thought that this system is giving us benefits. How can it be wrong? So first they rejected it straight away. However, when they saw that Musa was not going to go away, they had to counter it. He had some support among Bani Israel who were subservient to Pharaoh and his cohorts possessing power. Hence, if we remember, there was a moment in the court of Pharaoh who had stood up against him. Hence, Pharaoh became fearful of losing the servitude of Bani Israel, and he decided to end this opposition from Musa and Haroon, who wanted to free Bani Israel. They declared that since this new proposed system based on permanent values is not compatible with the beliefs of their forefathers, hence they cannot accept it. This decision of theirs was based on carefully thought about the pros and cons of the challenge posed by the Wahi of Allah. Because what Wahi of Allah does is it exposes the weaknesses in the system of Batil. Because otherwise human beings who are living under the system of Batil, they think this is what reality looks like. But when true reality comes to them, then they are able to compare the two. 1078 to 79 further reflections. Initially, not many are attracted towards the guidance. As happens with the professing of Haqq, Mu'mineen who do this persevere in this. Gradually, some people are attracted to the guidance of Allah as it appeals to their intellect and reasoning. The Wahi of Allah firstly draws attention to the issues created by man-devised systems, because that provides the perspective to the people to whom we are addressing. Secondly, it provides an alternative system together with values. Thirdly, it explains the logic behind this system. Fourthly, it helps to unite the hearts and minds of those who come to it, and then it gives continued assurance that Allah's companionship and help is always made available on this path. As this movement gains strength, those who are beneficiaries of the system of Batil start to feel threatened. And this is what happened. If we go through the story of Pharaoh and he was confronted by Musa, that gradually Pharaoh realized that people are getting attracted towards what Musa is telling them, which they should, and they then resort to this rhetoric that these people wish to dislodge this existing setup, and so the beneficiaries of the existing system need to do something about it, which is a fact. Haqq comes to replace Batil. Here in these verses, the Quran has summed up the whole period of struggle spread over many years in a few lines. The battle lines became drawn between these two belief systems, and they then declared that they have no interest in becoming Mu'mineen. Because once Haqq is presented, then people can make a choice that on which side they want to put their weight. Next to verses 79 to 80, Pharaoh decided to confront Musa and Haroon. وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنُ أَتُونِي بِكُلِّ سَاحِرٍ عَلِيمٍ فَلَمَّا جَاءَ السَّحَرَةُ قَالَ لَهُم مُوسَى أَلْقُوا مَا أَنْتُمْ مُلْقُونَ. Pharaoh issued a decree to bring into my presence however many religious leaders, that is magicians, there are in the country. Because now Pharaoh reached that stage where he thought that to counter Musa and Haroon, he needs to get hold of his own scholars. Hence, when those religious clergy, followers of Batil, arrived, Musa asked them to present whatever they wished to present. Further reflections on these two verses. Here the Quran points to this fact that when Musa pressed hard on Pharaoh with his demands, for example, stop enslaving Bani Israel and others, and to let them go with him to some other land so that they can practice Deen as a system under the guidance of the Wahi of Allah, Pharaoh refused this. Now, I've taken this from other verses and from the Quran, and that is where it is important that when we are studying one part of the Quran, the whole context should be before us, whole perspective should be before us so that we can understand that in what context these verses are discussing this issue. Instead, he countered this by saying that he too can get his religious scholars to all together and present opposing arguments to the Wahi of Allah. He announced amongst his people to invite every scholar who is well versed with the art of presenting arguments to counter Musa. By then, they would have heard about Musa and the values presented by him. We can relate this to the message of the system of Deen presented by Tulu Islam and the opposition we receive from the well-entrenched Quranic system, especially of sectarian Muslims. The interesting part is that they all complain about the existing state of affairs in the countries in which they live, but when an alternative system of Deen from the pure Quran is presented to them, they do not find any attraction in it at all. And this is very interesting. We all experience it, and I frequently experience it, that when the message of the pure Quran as a solution is presented, they all turn their backs. They turn their faces away because they don't want it. This is for two reasons. Firstly, they look for a solution within the belief system which they hold, despite knowing full well that this is the very system of beliefs which has created problems for them, as a result of which they are living in hell. So the system which is creating hell for them, and they are complaining about that hell, they want to somehow improve that hell, and don't realize that if it was supposed to improve, it would have done it by now. And that is the point we should keep it in mind and we should draw their attention to. Secondly, they can clearly see the loss of benefits from the existing system of kufr as they themselves are beneficiaries of this system. They are quite content and willing to sacrifice their hereafter for these short-term benefits, despite knowing that this system creates yatim and miskin. Whether willingly or unwittingly, they become contributor to the system which creates yatim and miskin. They are not willing to give up their benefits because they do not look at the overall picture of the system of Deen, which is for the good of everyone. Iman in Wahi paves the way forward. Now the time for presentation of the case for Batil and Haqq, that is two opposing ideologies of life, arrived, and Musa asked them to outline their arguments in support of the system of Pharaoh. This was essentially a description of the benefits which the rich and powerful were reaping from the capitalist system of that time and its resultant effects on the general population across the land. Because at that time, most of the economy was based on agricultural land. And there were owners of land, and of course, people, serfs who were working for them, and they were being exploited. So this point, we should keep it in mind. The Quran has pointed to another important issue of having sufficient courage to stand up for one's conviction and iman, i.e. to communicate to the people in power, for example, through organizing a physical meeting, through a letter, through a third party, the use of media, local contacts. Because if we see over here that Hazrat Musa and his brother Haroon both had developed enough courage to stand up to the wrong system. And they went around and talked to the people and also talked to the people in position of power. So same is our case, that we have to pass on the message to others, because it does two things. Firstly, those who are looking for guidance may be attracted by this. And second is it strengthens our own resolve, our own self on this path. This is an essential part of our self-development. Just see how much Musa and Haroon had developed due to their Iman and Saleh deeds, so that they stood up against the system of Batil. More on this as we go through the account of Bani Israel. It is also implicit here that Musa must have convinced himself with the guidance of Wahi and its need for replacing the unjust system. He had already experienced the hardships of the wrong system, and this account is covered in detail in various surahs of the Quran. For example, in Surah Taha, it is noted, وَفَتَانَكَ فَتُونَ فَلَبِسْتَ سَنِينَ فِي أَهْلِ مَدْيَنَ ثُمَّ جِئْتَ عَلَىٰ قَدَرٍ يَا مُوسَى. After going through various trials and tribulations of life spread over many years, you have reached that state of development of the self which now meets the divine criterion. And this statement is from Allah's direction. O Musa, just note the selection of the words by the Quran, that how Allah is addressing Hazrat Musa, that, O Musa, it is not that you have just been asked to go on this mission. You have gone through a series of trials and tribulations before reaching this point in time. Out of interest, the next verse sums this up, وَاسْتَنَاتُكَ لِنَفْسِي. And the Quran says, and I have prepared you, O Musa, for myself. And this is a great instruction for us, that our efforts are not going to go wasted if we keep persisting on this path and increase our knowledge and remain steadfast and keep doing salih deeds. This is what the Wahi of Allah helps us to become. The Quran places its eminence and loftiness within human grasp tangibly. 1081, Wahi helps to understand Fasad and then helps to deal with it effectively. I'll go through the meanings. When they had presented their line of arguments and reasoning, Musa told them that whatever you have presented is based completely on batil and deceit. This is once the scholars of Pharaoh had presented their case, then Hazrat Musa is countering it. Its reality is nothing. Allah will very soon consign it to oblivion, because the purpose of this batil religion of yours and the aim of your system is to create fasad among mankind. And the law of Allah is that the affairs of those who create fasad among humanity are never successful. Let us look at some further points of this verse. Two ideologies of life point to two different paths. As the scenario developed between two opposing ideologies of life, Musa let the Pharaoh's magicians, that is religious clerics, go first, and they presented their side of their ideology of life. This is a challenging part in this confrontation, as Musa and Haroon already knew the issues of the unjust system. However, justice demands that in this dialogue, both sides should have the opportunity to present their case clearly and plainly. When it came to Musa's turn, he presented his line of argument in light of the Wahi of Allah. He informed them that the unjust system which they have is exceeding all limits of injustice and is tyrannical. And he must have given all the examples that what is going on in your society, as suffering is visible everywhere. At another place, the Quran has summed this up by stating, "Izhaba ila Fir'auna innahu tagha." Just see the word tagha. Tagha is all kinds of rebelliousness and transgressions which human beings do against others. Go both of you to Pharaoh, indeed he has transgressed all bounds. Here we need to revive the state of our own Iman when we had accepted it without any external or internal compulsion. La ikraha fi Deen qad tabayyana ar-rushdu min al-ghayy faman yakfur bit-taghut wa yu'min billah. Just concentrate on this word, faman yakfur bit-taghut, and taga, which is used over here, that we also have to reject taghut. We have to reject all the rebelliousness and transgressions in the world and then accept Allah's Iman, and then we will come to this path and start doing salih deeds. Just note the differentiation to which the Quran has drawn our attention by saying that in order to accept Iman, we had recognized Taghut and then rejected it and then made our commitment to Allah. If we cannot see injustice in the world, then our Iman is meaningless in the balance of Allah. Standing up for Haqq strengthens the self. By noting this in that verse, Inna Allaha sayubtiluhu, i.e., surely Allah will declare all these as batil, the lies and deceits of your unjust system. Because when Haqq comes, it exposes the lies of a batil system. It makes us look through the reality of the things. An interesting part of this statement is that the Quran has pointed to a short time scale for countering this system of batil. In terms of scaling, we will refer to these as we analyze this story further on. Another interesting aspect here is that Musa and his brother are initially pitched against Pharaoh and his people, and it appears that they are contesting from the side of Bani Israel. But as the story develops, we will witness that the whole of Bani Israel was not supporting them wholeheartedly. So there were also divisions within Bani Israel. There were some who thought that they are quite happy under the system of Pharaoh, because they were the beneficiaries of the system. In our own case, the biggest opposition at this stage has been appearing from the direction of Muslims who are divided into sects themselves, who are unwilling to review their contaminated belief systems, which are actually the cause for their decline and humiliation in the world. At the conclusion of this summary of the exchange, the Quran has summed up the permanent value for all times that Inna Allaha la yuslihu amal al-mufsidin. Those who spread fasad on Allah's earth, their affairs can never be amicably resolved, or they can never achieve balance in their life. We can see the evidence of this fasad in the world of 2023. The last verse for today's presentation, Al-Haqq is from Allah, 1082. وَيُحِقُّ اللَّهُ الْحَقَّ بِكَلِمَاتِهِ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُجْرِمُونَ. Hence, you will witness how Allah, through His established law in comparison to your fasad creating system, firmly establishes the system of haqq and justice, producing constructive results. No matter how much the establishment and strengthening of it may be vexatious to this party which is bent upon creating injustice and tyranny. Deen of Allah is haqq. Here the Quran has summarized its aim for us to give us pause from what is discussed so far in this surah. We have seen that over here the Quran gives us a break. The story of Musa and Haroon is continuing, and then Quran brings in Al-Haqq over here, and we will see then subsequently the story again continues. This can be in response to what is noted between Pharaoh and Musa, and this can also be a general statement of fact to remind us that understanding Al-Haqq is something which should remain before our eyes all the time. Since the description is about control and authority in the universe, and Allah has appeared with all His attributes here. Here we will try to expand this in more detail to refresh our memory and further strengthen our commitment to Allah and His system of Deen. If we remember, I quoted a verse over here from Surah Tawbah, وَالَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بِالْهُدَى وَدِينَ الْحَقِّ لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُشْرِكُونَ. Allah is He who has sent His messenger with guidance so that Deen of Al-Haqq becomes established above all other beings, that is, all other systems which human beings have devised. This system should overcome all those systems ultimately. Of course, if human beings make an effort. And this occurs even if the mushrikeen do not like it or resist it. Just compare the decisiveness in this statement and the part of the statement referred to in the verse under view. وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُجْرِمُونَ. Exactly same words are used, وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُشْرِكُونَ. And over here in this verse 1082, it is وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُجْرِمُونَ. So mushrikun and mujrimun are interchangeable terms. That is, mushrikun are also the criminals. By stating that Pharaoh and his clique was an establishment of criminals which was tyrannical and coercive and was not letting humanity bring forth their latent potentials. So if human beings have certain latent potentials, and all those people who by establishing a system do not let these potentials come out and flourish, they are criminals in the sight of Allah. and we can see those criminals. And if we cannot see them, we should try to see them. We should try to develop our thoughts to that level where we can grasp these issues. Further elaboration, we can easily figure out that Deen and Al-Haqq are synonymous, and that Mushrikeen are those who resist and prevent establishment of the system of Deen. Now, the issue which appears before Tulu Islam is what should be done. And that is an important thing, because as we are going through these verses, we should always keep it in mind that what is in it for us, that is through Islam, and how can we relate it to the environment in which we are living. Allah has clearly decreed to make it clear that He is on the side of those who are steadfast in striving for the establishment of this system of Deen, as were Nuh, Musa, Haroon, Ibrahim, Yusuf, Rasulullah, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and peace be upon all of them. Over here in these presentations, we should keep it in mind that we are just taking the names, but that does not mean that we are not adding Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam or Alaihi Islam to that. Recognizing these criminals and the effects of their deeds is an important part of our pursuit towards Deen. If we fail to recognize the criminal basis of the system around us and have some soft corner for it due to being a beneficiary, then our conviction is not enough to be recognized by Allah of the Quran to seek His aid in this matter. And this is an important comment which I have noted over here in the light of the Quran, is that we should develop that firmness, because the system which creates yatim and miskin, which creates injustice and creates fasad and the conflicts in the world, if we are not happy with those effects, then people who create that system, who are pursuing that system, we should also have firmness against them, like Hazrat Musa and Hazrat Haroon had against Pharaoh. We need to keep reminding ourselves on a continuous basis. This is why it is important to remain united and to keep reminding ourselves of this lofty aim of Deen. The Quran has declared emphatically that Al-Haqq min Rabbika fala takun min al-mumtareen. And it's amazing that Allah, because He has created human being and He knows our inner thoughts and how these function. So Quran is bringing out every possible aspect of human psyche which comes out or displays itself at some point in time during our life. Al-Haqq is from your Rabb, so do not have any doubt in it. Because if you have a doubt, you haven't recognized Al-Haqq. And once you have recognized Al-Haqq, that is, we have recognized Al-Haqq, then the doubts will disappear. In order to acquire complete conviction, we need to work on this, and this needs time. Let us remind ourselves with the salient points of Al-Haqq. Something to appear as a concrete incident or firm reality before us, i.e., it is not that we just accept it merely as an abstract concept or belief, rather it becomes its own evidence due to its concrete and constructive outcomes. Second point is something becoming established and strengthened in such a way that it cannot be erased, nor does it move from its place. This condition becomes created through constructive outcomes. That thing which meets the demands of the time precisely and accurately and is exactly in line with the law of protection and sustainability of nature. The matter is not zan, that it does not have any doubt, suspicion, conjecture, presumptuous, uncertain, and it must be certain. That thing which is not in need of external evidences, but is an evidence of its own self, like the sun comes out and everyone knows that there is a sun. And similarly, once we know that the system around us is wrong, and when we present Al-Haqq, then Al-Haqq, we should explain it in a way that it becomes an evidence of its own truth. It meets every criterion of justice and truth. And I've taken it from the Bible Quran by Allama Qureshi. To conclude, reiterating few guidelines from the accounts of the messengers. The law of requital and the law of respite made the basis of their message to their people, together with details of the permanent values and Allah's attributes. They made it clear that the system which they had in place was blatantly criminal and was promoting injustice in their respective societies and could not continue as it was against Al-Haqq. If those in power did not come to Haqq, then they will be replaced by the system of Deen, and it is better that they do not cut short their physical life and instead accept the guidance of the Wahi of Allah. Barring a few, most rejected, at least initially, Allah's Wahi, and as a consequence, they face the outcomes of their evil deeds about which they were continuously warned by the messengers and their companions. That is, Jamaat al-Mu'mineen. The point over here is that the evil results of their wrongdoings were in any case going to come up. But now, by virtue of presenting Al-Haqq, there is something there available which will replace them. This elimination and replacement process was different according to the circumstances of the time, as this is dependent on the physical environment of the time, but the outcome was the same. I made this comment because sometimes it comes to our mind that we look for some kind of a similarity between the scenarios which are presented in the Quran in relation to previous messengers and the scenarios which exist in which we live. But the point over here is that we should not look for similarity of scenarios, but we should look for the values which people went against, and as a result they suffered. And the values are the same. So all those permanent values and Allah's laws against which people are going, against which the people of today are going, the consequences will appear at some point in time. So that is the point I'm trying to make over here. Hence, it is important for us that we do not get bogged down looking for similar physicality of the events, but keep the values in mind which govern this process of elimination and replacement via the law of requital. Because law of requital is still working. And we should look at the way it is working and also look for the effects of what people are doing in totality. And then we can find out the direction to which the world events are taken. We should endeavor to make reference to the permanent values rather than to the historical context of those events. It did not happen in a few years. The whole process was spread over many years and in some cases nearly the whole lifetime of a messenger. The issue before Tulu Islam is not to become impatient about the outcome, but to concentrate on enhancing our understanding, keep sharing with others, and remain united and focused on the aim of Deen. We come across these kind of comments that what is Tulu Islam doing? It is doing nothing. And people who make those comments actually do not understand the Quran the way they should understand it. If we look at the lives of messengers of Allah, they spent whole of their life pursuing the aims of Wahi. And then towards the end, they got the results either through the destruction of that people because they did not come to the path of Allah, or they managed to establish the system or at least make a start. So we should also look at that without putting in our best and without understanding the whole of the message of the Quran, we should not jump to this conclusion as if nothing is happening. Law of requital is always working, and we should keep an eye on that, and at the same time keep increasing our understanding and keep doing salih deeds. Because life in any case is not going to end with death. So if we cannot see the results in our lifetime, at least we'll be leaving behind those who will get the results in their lifetime. The Quran helps to signpost our efforts clearly, and these signs provide the criteria to check our progress on this path. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.